So, yeah, that was an awesome talk. Like for me, that kind of just like option of jumping into crypto, even if you're not necessarily like, the typical joke in like development is you're asked to have like 10 years of experience in something that's existed for like 5. And I think that like blockchain isn't really very particular about that. I think it realizes that everything's very fluid, everything's moving very quickly, and like you want to get involved in something like that's actually like the probably biggest takeaway, beyond even what I would say here. Like I think the most important thing for anyone to take away from this is like if you just get involved in stuff, you will have like a lot of opportunities just like emerge because the space is so new and there's so much to actually still do. So just like join Discord channels, like talk to people, like everyone's pretty open, like DM someone if you're like, hey, your project's cool, like want to learn like more about what you're up to, like people will respond. So just that's one important note. But what I just wanted to talk about is actually a bit about Gitcoin and like what we've been doing over the last few rounds with Gitcoin grants. And for those who don't know, like Gitcoin is kind of amalgamation of different experiments around funding open source software. And it started with the idea of bounties. So paying someone for an individual task anywhere around the world and allowing them to accrue sort of like skills and then experience from doing that. Unlike Udemy, like you'll get paid instead of having to pay for that experience, which is cool. But the thing that we sort of realized was when people got to the point that they developed a certain amount of skills, they ultimately didn't really have anywhere to fund the projects that they wanted to go and work on, especially if they were newer to the space, didn't have like a level of background where they could just like ask for VC funding, or where their project was like not quite as ready for that stage. And so we created this idea of Gitcoin grants, which actually was originally just like, let's try to crowdfund projects. And very shortly after we built the first prototype, Vitalik wrote about this idea of quadratic funding. And quadratic funding was actually like really what like made Gitcoin grants work. The idea, for those who don't know, just to be very brief, the goal of this is not to dive into like the mechanics of all this, is just that like in traditional matching funding, you have a pool of funds, people donate the amount that like is directly proportional to the donation, and the matching pool goes to that grant. In this case, what you're trying to do instead is like democratically distribute funds from the matching pool based on the actual number of people who are signaling their interest in a given project. So, if 10 people, or like let's say 8 people donate $1 each to some project, and like 2 people donate $4 each to another, the former would get $64 in matching, whereas the latter would get $16 in matching, in like a naive example. And that's even though the numbers are the same in terms of the amount donated, the amount of people who support one project is clearly greater in the former case. So that's roughly the mechanism. We've like done a lot of work on a few parts of this to improve it, which I'll get into. But like really just to like hit it home, our mission is like around the collective creation of open source and open internet and an open economy. And it's kind of just being fortuitous that like Ethereum has very much evolved around that mission. So we find ourselves very aligned with Ethereum. And naturally, that's led us to a lot of the projects that we're working on. This slide has way too many things on it, but like just to hit home, like roughly what we're trying to do here. We've funded a lot of the DeFi mainstays that have come into the ecosystem. Uniswap, people don't really know, was a grantee actually at one point. It also received an Ethereum Foundation grant, to be sure. It wasn't just us. Prismatic and Lighthouse both received funding. Samsung, who's now sort of one of the more well-known sort of white hat hackers in the space. Evan Van Ness, Richard, who will be coming up in a second. We got some funding for Ethos.js through this process. EIP 1559, which I think after a lot of debate, we agree is like a good thing for the space, mostly. And then CoinDesk and others helped us raise about 200,000 for a variety of health and social justice causes this year, given that there's been a ton of stuff outside of just crypto going on that we thought this mechanism could apply to. So ultimately, yeah, the goal here is being like, create this funnel of people who want to participate in Web3, not just speculate. Help those people create projects, and then help those projects actually sustainably fund themselves. And that's been, the ecosystem that we've helped develop alongside the community. So actually, like, I'll get to it in a second, but like the funding pool that makes up that 500,000 was actually from a bunch of different projects in the ecosystem that have come to support us. And then the 1.38 million, just to be clear, is also not our money. Like, it's also just the community who decided that, like, hey, if we create this ritual around like funding public goods on this quarterly basis, like, we can actually do a lot more together, and like there's something valuable to that. So we're not really like trying to be extractive. We're just straight up like providing a service that like does these things. And then the value comes from the fact that like all of this underlying infrastructure supports everything that we're doing at Ethereum from that point. So this round was actually by far the largest yet. We had about like 1.38 million in community contributions, which I think almost doubles the last round. And then you've got like a chart, which basically shows the same. And then these are the matching funders, which I think is worth noting because you have like Uniswap, you have Maskbook, you have a few others who were previously grantees in this list. And so you're seeing like kind of the beauty of Ethereum being that people are kind of naturally inclined to go back and support the ecosystems that supported them. And it's not something traditionally, if you know the history of open source, that happens. So it's really been great just to see that sort of emerge. And then in terms of, things we've been trying to do, anyone who's really interested in like Sybil attacks or really interested in like the idea of collusion, Vitalik actually has a great post just like on collusion specifically. It's really worth just like diving into some of the research that Block Science has done here. And basically what we've been figuring out is like, I mean, it's kind of obvious from the onset, like if you have the ability to just like break up your like funds into multiple accounts and you can't like prove that those are all like, different people, theoretically you could have someone just attack this by creating lots of accounts and creating lots of matching funding for the project that they want to see funded. So what we've done is a few things around like creating more robust identity systems, working with like Bright ID, Upala, Identa Network, and a few others, just to make sure that we have actual like proof of like unique human, so to speak, versus just like addresses. And those don't have to be real name, like real, histories. Those can be even just like distinct activity or like otherwise like work histories on platforms like GitHub, eventually hopefully platforms like Radical. And that can kind of create this sort of like rough protection against Sybil. The other way we are starting to do this is by just like analyzing the data, which is what Block Science is being particularly good at, just like finding patterns in the graphs of basically grants to donors that are particularly like kind of sketchy. And that's what we've been up to for the last sort of few rounds. It's just trying to really optimize for minimizing the number of colluders, because ultimately the more that happens, the harder it is to scale the matching pool in a sustainable way without risking a huge amount of the pool. So that's where we are now. There's a lot of other stuff I could probably dive into, but I'll leave it there for kind of Q&A in the interest of time. Thanks, Alan.
But yeah, you guys are doing amazing work with Gitcoin. Just see you guys all over the place on Twitter, and it's even more amazing to see former grantees putting or I guess recontributing back into the ecosystem that they originally benefited from. So it's really, really awesome.
I think we're good in terms of questions, but like that point, is really important. And like I actually would encourage everyone to also read Vitalik's post around legitimacy. Like one of the things that I think allows that to happen is the fact that there are social norms around this topic, around like giving back, that again don't really exist in Web2. So like if you're kind of interested in those economic models and like sustaining open source, and you are like, should I join Web3? I'm biased, but my answer is yes. So I'm gonna try to dim my screen here so I'm not like completely blinding, but unless there are any other questions, just thanks so much, everyone.